About a week ago, I went on a trail ride on my stash, and while I was driving back from the trailhead, someone in a Chrysler 200 lightly tapped me from behind. Now they fled the scene. I pulled over and I got out and I checked everything. My bike rack was slightly bent, but everything still looked secure, so I continued on home. Unfortunately, about 10 miles down the road, my bike fell out of the rack and onto the road. When I got home and I was able to fully assess the damage, I found out that I had a couple minor issues and a couple issues that were worse. The minor issues were one of my bar ends, my hand grips just got scuffed a little bit, and my seat got a scuff. The other issues had to do with my derailleur. It got bent, it hit the ground pretty hard. I've bent it back into shape and I think I'm shifting pretty good now. The other issue was the bars spun, and so all of the cables that go to the back of the bike got stretched a little bit. The dropper post in the derailleur shifter cable seems to work fine and seems to be okay. The hollow brake line though, it was stretched pretty bad, and up near the reservoir it has a crimp in the hose. And so I doubt the integrity of that now, and so today we're going to replace it. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the new brake hose and I'm going to zip tie it along the length of the old brake hose. Now once I've done that, I take into account just how much of this hose has to go inside in front of the jam nut there. Then I take a pair of cable cutters and I cut it nice and clean. You want to use a pair of cable cutters so that you don't mash the line. You don't want to crimp that. And now I take a pair of cutters, remove all the zip ties. Before we work on this brake line, it's good to remove the rear wheel, because if we get any brake fluid onto this rear rotor, that's a bad thing. After I've made sure that the derailleur is in the highest gear, the smallest cog on the cassette, and I've loosened the axle a little bit, I position myself behind the bike and I put my torso into the wheel to steady it. I then disengage the clutch on my rear derailleur and I grab the rear derailleur and fully extend it and open it up. Then I take out the axle the rest of the way. Once the axle is removed, lay that to the side, and then I grab the wheel and I just drop it right out of the chain and derailleur. I also want to get the brake pads out of the way, because if they get any mineral oil or brake fluid on them, they're going to squeal. Because I want to reuse these pads, I'll use a non-marring bicycle lever. It's plastic. That way I can push the pads and the pistons back into the caliper. Now that the pistons are pushed back, I can remove this set screw. And then I can slide the brakes out. I'll just set those aside. Now that we've got the brakes out, we're going to install the piston block. The piston block is retained with the same set screw. What I've done now is I've positioned the bike so that the caliper is the lowest point in the system, and I've flex tied the handlebars so that the reservoir is the highest point in the system. When I'm at this point, I take a coffee cup and then I poke a hole through it. Then I take a zip tie and I feed it through the hole. Then I take the coffee cup and I zip tie it to the chainstay right below the banjo bolt. Right like that. Before I open the banjo bolt, I go ahead and I take the cap off of the reservoir so that air can come in and the fluid can drain more easily. Now that we've got the reservoir cap off, it's time to remove the banjo bolt and let all of the fluid out. Now we finish cutting the cable ties that are holding the brake line to the frame. Now that the line and reservoir are drained, we can remove this nut. And there we have the olive and the end of the brake line. Shimano provides a few items with the new brake line. They provide you a new flange nut. They give you this piece, which is called the olive, and they give you this piece, which is called the barb. They also provide new O-ring seals that go into this connection point. And the last thing that comes with the kit is they give you these blocks, which are used to hold the line while you insert the barb. I'm not going to use that. I found this, you can use it to hold the line and then push the barb in. Off of my other brake line, I had to salvage this cap. The first thing that goes on is this cap. Then you put on this bolt or flange nut. I think it's called that. I hope I'm not calling it the wrong thing the whole time through here. Then you place the olive on there. Okay, we've got it all lined up. Now we're ready to just drive it home. All right, we're now ready to insert our new brake line into the reservoir. And then we slide in that olive. And then we start screwing in this flange bolt. Now as we tighten this down, it is going to smash that olive, and that olive is going to seat very tightly against the line and the barb inside. Now we run this cover up and snug it in. Now we want to roll this line out. The line comes rolled up from Shimano from the factory. So you want to lay this line out, and you want to make sure that it is laying the way it naturally wants to lay and does not have any kinks in it. Once we've got the line running naturally, we want to go ahead and take our O-rings and just place them in the fitting. And they'll sit there, they'll stick because of the grease. We then insert the bolt and just hand tighten that. Making sure the O-rings are still intact, let's go ahead and run that all the way in. And now I just loosely zip tie everything back into place. Now this, I think, is the easiest part that most people get daunted by. You just want to make sure that your reservoir is the highest point in the system, and we fill from the caliper to push all of the air up the line, out through the reservoir, and make sure the reservoir is full of mineral oil. To do this part, I highly recommend this overflow cup from Shimano. It screws right into the reservoir and it lets brake fluid come into it, but it will not drain back out. I've also seen a few of these that are opaque. I recommend something translucent like this because you want to be able to see when the fluid is starting to fill this cup. We'll now fill this syringe with mineral oil. All right, now we take this little rubber cap off of this fill nipple and then we loosen it. Now I leave the wrench on there for this next step because you're going to want to tighten it and you want to make sure that you have free range of movement to be able to tighten it back. So I leave the wrench sitting on that chainstay. Then I get my mineral oil syringe and I place the hose over the nipple and I begin to push mineral oil into the system. While we are doing that, we are always looking up at that fill reservoir to see when mineral oil starts to appear there. And here it comes. That's good. Okay. I'm going to tighten down the nipple and remove the hose on my syringe. So I'm going to go ahead and take this cap off. When you take the cap off, you depress this little needle down into the hole, into the seat so that it stands like that. And then you know the fluid can't flow back. Then you start removing this cup. There it's removed. And I see nice clean mineral oil coming out there. Move the piston block. The brakes were actually a little bit more wore than I thought they were, and so I'm going to drop a new set of brakes in here. And we don't want to even think about squeezing that rear brake until we get the wheel in there. Okay, I then go ahead and squeeze the brakes a few times in order to fill the cylinders and push the pistons back out. And then I remove the reservoir cap again. And now with my little fill bottle, I go ahead and just top off my reservoir. At this point, all that's left to do is to tidy up all of the zip ties in the cockpit and then go ride. Later.